Listen closely, my friends. Before the world gets a chance to disappoint you, distract you, or tell you what to worry about, you get one quiet moment that belongs entirely to you. The moment your eyes open. Most people waste it. They reach for a phone, absorb someone else's life, and allow yesterday's problems to become today's identity. Then they spend the rest of the day wondering why their mind feels tired before their life has even begun. A Stoic would approach that moment differently. Your morning is not just the beginning of another day. It is the first negotiation between your mind and the world. If you lose that negotiation before breakfast, everything afterward becomes harder. But if you learn to govern yourself before the noise arrives, you walk into the same world with a different mind, and sometimes a different mind is all you needed to change the direction of your life. Think about a ship leaving the harbor. A tiny change in its direction at the beginning can eventually take it to an entirely different destination. Your mornings work the same way. One thought seems insignificant. One choice seems small. One disciplined action seems ordinary. But repeated every morning, those small decisions become your character, and your character eventually becomes your life. So in this video, we're going through 7 Stoic morning habits designed to help you start your day with greater clarity, discipline, emotional control, and purpose. These aren't complicated rituals or another checklist you'll abandon after a week. They are principles for controlling the first hours of your day before the world starts controlling them for you. And stay until the end, because the final habit is where the entire morning changes direction. Instead of asking what the day will give you, you'll learn how to decide what you will give the day. Because a powerful life doesn't begin when everything finally goes your way. It begins when you stop allowing everything around you to decide who you are. Habit 1. Win the first battle. Do not touch your phone. The first thing you reach for in the morning may be quietly deciding the quality of your entire day. Before your feet touch the floor, your hand reaches toward a glowing screen. One notification becomes 5. One video becomes 20 minutes. Someone else's success enters your mind. Someone else's argument becomes your emotion. And suddenly, before you have even spoken to yourself, the world has already spoken for you. This is not simply a phone problem. It is an attention problem. Your attention is the doorway through which information enters your mind, and whatever enters repeatedly begins influencing what you think about, what you desire, and what you believe deserves your energy. If the first thing your brain receives every morning is noise, comparison, urgency, and entertainment, you're training yourself to seek stimulation before purpose. The Stoics would have recognized the danger immediately. Epictetus built his philosophy around the distinction between what is within our control and what is not. Your notifications are not yours to control. Other people's opinions are not yours to control. The news cycle is not yours to control. But whether you surrender the first moments of your consciousness to those things, that decision is yours. Imagine a general entering a battlefield. Before the battle begins, he would not hand the enemy his map, his weapons, and the location of his strongest position, and then ask why he lost. Yet every morning, people do something surprisingly similar. They hand their most valuable resource, their attention, to strangers before they have even decided what matters to them. There is a reason this feels so powerful. Your brain does not experience every notification as meaningless information. Novelty and unpredictable rewards can pull attention strongly, especially when they arrive immediately after waking. That is why the phone can feel almost magnetic. It is not because you are weak. It is because you have built a system that rewards your attention before you have consciously chosen where to place it. Now imagine two people waking at 6:30 in the morning. The first spends the next 30 minutes consuming whatever the algorithm places in front of him. By 7, he has already compared his life to 3 strangers, absorbed 5 opinions, watched someone else's success, and reacted emotionally to information he cannot change. The second person keeps the phone away, drinks water, walks outside, thinks quietly, and decides what deserves his attention. They have the same 24 hours, but they did not begin with the same mind. This is where your morning becomes Stoic. Do not begin your day by asking, "What is happening in the world?" Begin by asking, "What deserves my attention today?" That question creates a psychological boundary between you and the noise. Marcus Aurelius lived in a world without smartphones, but his problem was not so different. He faced political pressure, military threats, personal loss, and endless demands from other people. His solution was not to control everything around him. He repeatedly returned his attention to the task immediately in front of him and the character he was responsible for. Your version of that practice can be incredibly simple. Keep your phone away from your bed. Give yourself the first 20-30 minutes without social media, messages, or unnecessary notifications. Use those minutes to wake your body, breathe, think, write, read, or simply sit in silence. And notice what happens. At first, your mind may tell you that you are missing something. That feeling is important because perhaps you are not missing anything. Perhaps you are finally noticing how addicted your attention has become to being interrupted. There is another reason this habit matters. When you protect the beginning of your morning, you create a small daily experience of self-command. You tell your brain, "I decide when the world gets access to me." That may sound like a tiny decision, but repeated every morning, it becomes evidence that you are capable of choosing your behavior instead of automatically obeying your impulses. And that is the deeper lesson. The goal is not to hate your phone. The goal is not to become disconnected from the world. The goal is to stop letting instant stimulation become your first command of the day. Because if the first battle you fight every morning is the battle for your attention, and you win it, you enter the rest of the day with something far more valuable than extra screen time. You enter it with yourself. And tomorrow morning, before you ask what the world wants from you, pause for 1 second and ask, "What do I want my mind to become today?" Because the answer may determine far more than what you do before breakfast. It may determine who you become by the end of the year. Habit 2. Meet your mind before you meet the world. There is a strange way modern life begins. Your body wakes up, but before your consciousness has fully settled, the world is already demanding a response. A message needs an answer. A deadline exists. Someone has posted something. Someone needs something from you. And without realizing it, you begin the day in reaction mode. You haven't chosen your direction. You've simply started responding to everyone else's. A Stoic morning begins differently. Before you ask what happened yesterday, what might happen today, or what someone else thinks about you, stand still long enough to hear your own mind. Not every thought deserves belief, but every morning deserves a moment of awareness. There is a difference between being alone with your thoughts and being controlled by them. The first creates clarity. The second creates chaos. Imagine waking in a room filled with dozens of voices speaking at once. One voice says you're behind. Another says you're not good enough. Another reminds you of yesterday's mistake. Another predicts something will go wrong. If you immediately believe every voice, the room becomes unbearable. But if you simply observe them without obeying them, something changes. The voices are still there, but they no longer own the room. This is where Stoic philosophy becomes deeply practical. The Stoics understood that an event and our judgment about that event are not the same thing. A difficult thought appearing in your mind is not a command. Anxiety is not a prophecy. Anger is not an instruction. Fear is not always evidence of danger. Your first mental reaction may be automatic, but what you do with it can become deliberate. Modern psychology gives us a similar insight through the idea of metacognition, the ability to observe your own thoughts rather than automatically becoming absorbed in them. When you can notice, "I'm having the thought that today is going to be terrible," you create distance between yourself and the thought. That tiny distance can become the space where choice begins. So give yourself a few quiet minutes every morning. Don't immediately fix anything. Don't immediately consume anything. Don't immediately escape anything. Observe. Ask yourself, what am I feeling right now? What am I worried about? What am I already assuming about today? Which of these things is actually within my control? These questions are powerful because they expose the invisible script your mind may have already written before the day begins. Consider someone who wakes up thinking, "Today is going to be another terrible day." They may not realize what that sentence does next. They become less patient. Small inconveniences feel larger. A delayed message feels personal. A difficult task feels like proof that the day is against them. The original thought becomes a lens, and the lens changes what they notice. Now, imagine beginning with a different question. Whatever happens today, what kind of person do I want to be when it happens? That question doesn't promise a perfect day. It creates something better, a prepared mind. Marcus Aurelius faced situations where he could not control the people around him, the political circumstances surrounding him, or the unpredictable events of an empire. Yet his journal repeatedly turned inward, not toward selfishness, but toward self-government. The battlefield was not always outside the palace. Often it was the interpretation taking place inside his own mind. You can practice the same principle before the world starts pulling at you. Sit somewhere quiet. Take a few slow breaths. Let the mind settle. Write down the thought that is occupying the most space. Then separate the situation from the story you've attached to it. Maybe you have an interview today. The fact, you have an interview. The story, if I fail, my entire future is ruined. Maybe someone hasn't replied to your message. The fact, they haven't replied. The story, they don't respect me anymore. Maybe you made a mistake yesterday. The fact, you made a mistake. The story, I'm the kind of person who always fails. The Stoic practice is learning to see the difference. Because once you separate reality from the story your mind created around reality, you regain room to act intelligently, and this is why the morning matters so much. The mind is quieter before the day's demands accumulate. There is less emotional residue. Fewer decisions have been made. You have an opportunity to examine the direction of your thinking before momentum takes over. Think of an arrow resting on a bow. Before it flies, its direction can still be changed. Once released, it follows the path created at the beginning. Your morning is that moment before release. You may not control everything that happens after you leave the house, but you can influence the mental direction from which you meet it. So tomorrow morning, don't ask only, "What do I have to do today?" Ask something deeper. What is happening inside me before the day begins? And do I want to carry it forward? Because sometimes the thing exhausting you isn't the day ahead. It's the story you brought into the day before it even started. And once you learn to meet your own mind before meeting the world, the next question becomes unavoidable. If you can choose your mental direction, what should you deliberately put into your mind first? Habit 3. Give your mind a direction before the world gives it one. Most people wake up with no destination for their attention. They simply open the door and let the day rush in. One headline, one message, one argument, one comparison, one unfinished problem, and suddenly their mind is carrying 10 different priorities before they have chosen a single one. A mind without direction does not remain empty. It gets occupied by whatever is loudest. This is why a Stoic morning needs intention, not a complicated schedule, not a perfect productivity system. One deliberate decision about what matters most today. Because if you don't decide what deserves your energy, urgency will decide for you. And urgency is rarely the same thing as importance. Think about a person entering a crowded railway station without knowing where they are going. Every train is moving. Every announcement is loud. Thousands of people are walking in different directions. If they simply follow whichever sound is closest, movement is guaranteed, but arrival is not. Your morning can look exactly like that. Constant movement without meaningful progress. The Stoics were obsessed with this distinction. Marcus Aurelius repeatedly reminded himself to return to the task directly in front of him. Not the entire future, not every possible problem. This task, this moment, this responsibility. That is a radically different way of living from allowing your mind to scatter itself across everything that could possibly happen. Before your day begins, choose one thing that would make the day meaningful, even if everything else became messy. It could be finishing an important piece of work, having a difficult conversation honestly, training your body, studying without distraction, spending meaningful time with your family. The specific action matters less than the principle. Give your mind a target before the world gives it distractions. There is also a deeper psychological reason for this. Every day contains more potential tasks than your attention can realistically handle. Your brain must prioritize. When you deliberately identify a priority, you reduce the number of competing decisions later. Instead of repeatedly asking, "What should I do now?" you already know what deserves your best energy. And notice the difference between a goal and a direction. A goal says, "I must finish everything today." A direction says, "Today I will protect the work that matters most." The first can create pressure. The second creates clarity. This is especially important because modern life rewards responsiveness. Someone sends a message, you answer. An email arrives, you check it. A notification appears, you open it. Someone else announces a problem, you immediately move toward it. Eventually, your entire day becomes a collection of reactions to other people's priorities. Then at night you wonder why you were busy all day but accomplished so little. You were moving, but you were not steering. There is an old story about Michelangelo looking at a block of marble. To someone else, it was simply a massive piece of stone. To him, it contained a form waiting to be revealed. Whether every detail of the story is historically accurate is less important than the principle. Mastery begins with seeing what matters before you begin removing everything that doesn't. Your morning can work the same way. Before the noise arrives, decide what deserves to remain. What can wait? What is unnecessary? What would you regret neglecting? What action would make you respect yourself tonight? These questions sharpen the day before the day has a chance to blur it. And don't choose 10 priorities. Choose one. Because when everything becomes important, nothing receives your full attention. Imagine a magnifying glass under the sun. Scattered light warms your hand. Focused light can generate enough heat to burn through material. Your attention works the same way. Scattered attention creates activity. Concentrated attention creates force. This is why your first meaningful decision should not be, how much can I accomplish today? It should be, where will I place my best attention? And once you answer that, protect it. Don't give your strongest mental hours to meaningless scrolling and your exhausted leftovers to the work that could change your life. Don't spend the first part of your day consuming other people's priorities and then complain that you have no energy for your own. Give your best attention a worthy destination. That is not selfishness, that is stewardship, because your attention is one of the few resources you spend every day without knowing exactly how much remains. So tomorrow morning, before you open another app, answer one question. What is the one thing today that deserves the best version of me? Write it down. Then do something unusual. Protect it before protecting everything else. Because a powerful morning isn't one where you accomplish 20 things. It's one where you refuse to let 20 meaningless things steal the one thing that actually matters. And once your mind has a direction, there is another battle waiting. Can you move toward that direction before comfort convinces you to turn back? Habit 4. Do something difficult before your mind can negotiate. There is a moment every morning when your mind begins bargaining with you. 5 more minutes. I'll do it later. Today I'm tired. Tomorrow I'll start properly. The negotiation sounds harmless because the decision is small, but every time you surrender to that voice, you're teaching yourself something much larger, that your immediate comfort has authority over your intention. A Stoic morning interrupts that pattern. Before comfort becomes persuasive, deliberately do one thing you would normally postpone. Get out of bed when you said you would. Step outside. Train. Read something difficult. Begin the task you've been avoiding. The objective isn't to make your morning miserable. It is to give your mind early evidence that your decisions are stronger than your impulses. Think about a person standing at the bottom of a cold mountain trail before sunrise. The path is steep, the air is sharp, and every instinct says to remain where it is warm. But the first step changes the psychology of the entire climb. The mountain hasn't become easier. The person has simply stopped negotiating with it. This principle reaches far beyond physical discipline. Every difficult thing you willingly approach in the morning strengthens your relationship with discomfort. You begin discovering that discomfort is not automatically a warning sign. Sometimes it is simply the sensation of doing something that matters before your brain has found a convenient excuse. That distinction is important because the human brain naturally tends to conserve effort. When a task looks demanding, the mind searches for easier alternatives. This is useful when you're conserving energy in a genuine emergency, but dangerous when every uncomfortable task gets interpreted as something to escape. If avoidance becomes your automatic response to discomfort, your comfort zone quietly becomes your prison. Look at the lives of people who mastered difficult crafts. A concert pianist doesn't become exceptional because they practice only when practice feels inspiring. An elite athlete doesn't train only on mornings when motivation arrives. A scientist doesn't continue researching because every experiment works. Their advantage comes from something less glamorous. They learned to act even when the emotional invitation to act was absent. The Stoics called this kind of discipline a form of freedom. Epictetus taught that freedom is not simply getting everything you want. It is becoming less enslaved by impulses that control you. If your mood decides whether you exercise, your mood becomes your master. If comfort decides whether you begin, comfort becomes your master. If fear decides whether you speak, fear becomes your master. But there is a deeper layer. The difficult action itself is not the transformation. The meaning you attach to the action is. If you wake up early thinking, "I hate this," I have to suffer because successful people suffer, you are building resentment. But if you think, I am practicing the ability to keep my word to myself, the same action becomes character training. One creates punishment, the other creates identity. This is why your first difficult action should be chosen carefully. It doesn't need to be extreme. In fact, something ordinary may be more powerful. Make your bed. Take a walk without your phone. Spend 10 minutes reading instead of scrolling. Finish the first page of the work you've been avoiding. Put your room in order. Do the small thing you promised yourself you would do. Then notice something. Your brain begins collecting evidence. I said I would do it, and I did. Tomorrow the evidence is still there. I said I would do it, and I did. Eventually, those tiny victories become something larger than motivation. They become self-trust. And self-trust changes the way you enter the world. A person who repeatedly breaks promises to themselves becomes hesitant when setting new goals. Somewhere underneath the ambition is a quiet suspicion. Will I actually follow through this time? But the person who repeatedly keeps small promises begins carrying a different internal voice. If I decide to do something, I can rely on myself. That is powerful, because confidence isn't always loud. Sometimes confidence is simply knowing that when the difficult moment arrives, you won't immediately abandon yourself. There is another reason this belongs in the morning. The first difficult action creates momentum before the world has a chance to consume your attention. You begin the day with an act of agency rather than reaction. You don't wait for discipline to appear. You practice discipline until it becomes easier to access. And remember, the goal is not to turn every morning into a military camp. Stoicism isn't about unnecessary suffering. It is about refusing to become dependent on comfort for your ability to function. So tomorrow, choose one small thing you have been avoiding. Do it before the excuses become sophisticated. Don't debate it for 10 minutes. Don't build a motivational speech around it. Don't wait until you feel different. Move first. Let the mind catch up afterward. Because every morning presents you with a quiet choice. You can teach your mind, I obey whatever feels comfortable. Or you can teach it something far more valuable. I can feel resistance and still move forward. And once you prove that to yourself early in the morning, the rest of the day begins from a completely different psychological position. Because the hardest person to defeat is not the person who never feels weakness. It is the person who has learned that weakness does not get the final vote. Habit 5. Remember that today is not promised. There is a thought most people avoid because it feels uncomfortable. This day is not guaranteed to you, not tomorrow, not next month, not even the next hour. We move through life as if time belongs to us, as if another morning is automatically waiting whenever we are ready for it. But the Stoics deliberately confronted impermanence, not to become pessimistic, but to become awake. Before you begin your morning, remember that you have been given something that millions of people would desperately want. Another ordinary day, another sunrise, another chance to speak to someone you love, another opportunity to correct a mistake, another opportunity to do the work you kept postponing. What feels ordinary while you have it can become priceless the moment you realize it could disappear. Marcus Aurelius repeatedly reflected on the temporary nature of human life. He wasn't trying to make himself miserable. He was trying to remove the illusion that there would always be more time. When you remember that life is finite, trivial things begin losing their power. A rude comment becomes smaller. A pointless argument becomes less attractive. The need to impress everyone becomes strangely exhausting. Imagine someone receiving a letter that says they have exactly 1 year left to live. Suddenly, They don't spend that morning obsessing over whether a stranger liked their photograph. They don't waste an hour proving themselves to someone who doesn't matter. They call the person they love. They work on something meaningful. They notice the sunlight through the window. The world hasn't changed. Their awareness of time has. You don't need a diagnosis or a tragedy to develop that awareness. You can practice it while life is still normal. Before touching your phone, sit for a moment and tell yourself, I have this day. I do not know how many more I will receive. Then ask, if this were the last ordinary morning of my life, what would deserve my attention? That question can expose priorities with frightening accuracy. Would you really spend the first hour comparing your life to strangers? Would you really carry yesterday's insult into today? Would you postpone the conversation that matters? Would you keep waiting for the perfect moment to begin becoming the person you know you could be? The Stoics used mortality as a lens because it stripped away unnecessary drama. Modern psychology also recognizes that awareness of limited time can change how people prioritize meaningful goals and relationships. When time feels unlimited, delay feels harmless. When time feels finite, delay becomes expensive. And there is a subtle danger here. You can lose your life without losing it all at once. It happens in tiny pieces. One morning wasted, one conversation postponed, one dream delayed, 1 year spent saying, I'll do it when things settle down. Then another year, then another. The tragedy is not always that life ends. Sometimes it is that we were physically present while mentally waiting for life to begin. So let this morning practice become a reminder. Don't postpone your life to some imaginary future version of yourself. Work toward the future, yes. Build, improve, save, learn. But don't make the mistake of believing that your current life has no value until you reach the next destination. A person can spend 10 years chasing financial success and wake up one morning realizing they missed the childhood of their own children. Another can spend years trying to become impressive while quietly becoming a stranger to themselves. Someone else can spend every morning worrying about a future that never arrives while ignoring the only moment they can actually live. This is why Stoic reflection on mortality is strangely liberating. It doesn't tell you life is short, so panic. It tells you life is short, so pay attention. There is a difference. When you remember that the clock is moving, you stop treating every moment as disposable. You become more selective about what deserves your anger, more intentional about what deserves your energy, more grateful for what you normally overlook. And perhaps most importantly, you stop waiting for perfect conditions before allowing yourself to live. Tomorrow morning, look at the sky for a few seconds. Feel the air. Notice that you are here. Then remember, this exact morning will never return. You may experience another morning, but never this one. That realization should not make you afraid of time. It should make you unwilling to waste it. And when you begin the day with that awareness, even an ordinary morning starts carrying a different kind of weight, because you finally understand that ordinary moments are often the ones you will someday wish you could have back. Habit 6. Choose your response before life chooses it for you. Most people don't begin their morning with a decision. They begin with a prediction. They wake up and immediately imagine what could go wrong, who might disappoint them, what problem might appear, or how difficult the day will be. Before anything has actually happened, they have already rehearsed their emotional reaction to it. A Stoic does something radically different. Prepare the mind without pretending to control the future. You don't wake up expecting a perfect day. You wake up knowing that something may interrupt you, frustrate you, delay you, criticize you, or change your plans, and you quietly decide that none of those events will automatically decide your character. This is one of the deepest Stoic practices. Negative visualization. The purpose isn't to become gloomy, it is to remove surprise from difficulty. If you occasionally imagine that the meeting may go badly, the traffic may be terrible, someone may misunderstand you, or a plan may collapse, you are not predicting disaster, you're rehearsing composure. Think about a firefighter before entering a burning building. They don't walk in thinking, nothing will go wrong. Their training exists precisely because something might. They have practiced what to do when visibility disappears, when heat rises, when the obvious exit is blocked. Preparation doesn't eliminate the fire. It changes the person walking into it. Your morning can contain the same kind of mental preparation. Before the day begins, ask yourself, what might test my patience today? What might tempt me to lose control? What situation could pull me into an emotional reaction? Then ask the more important question, who do I want to be when it happens? Notice the difference. You are not trying to control the event. You are preparing the person who will meet it. Imagine you're driving to an important meeting and traffic suddenly stops moving. The event is outside your control. But now two realities appear. One person begins hitting the steering wheel, checking the clock every 10 seconds, cursing strangers, and arriving emotionally exhausted before the meeting even begins. Another accepts the delay, changes the route if possible, makes the necessary call, and uses the remaining time to breathe and prepare. Same traffic, different mind, different day. That is the Stoic battlefield. The event doesn't always create the suffering. The meaning you attach to the event often determines how deeply it enters you. Modern cognitive psychology describes a related process through cognitive appraisal. People respond not only to what happens, but to how they interpret what happens. Two people can encounter the same event and experience completely different emotional reactions because their interpretations differ. This doesn't mean you can simply think positive and erase reality. If something hurts, acknowledge it. If something is unfair, recognize it. If something needs to be fixed, fix it. But don't add unnecessary suffering to unavoidable difficulty. The rain is one problem. Your anger at the rain is another. The criticism is one event. The 3 hours you spend replaying it in your head are another. The mistake happened yesterday. Punishing yourself for it every morning is a choice you can interrupt. This is why your morning should contain a moment of deliberate preparation. Tell yourself, today may not follow my plan. I can still follow my principles. That sentence is powerful because it separates your expectations from your character. Your plans can change. Your principles don't have to. Your schedule can collapse. Your discipline doesn't have to. Someone can misunderstand you. Your integrity doesn't have to change. Someone can treat you badly. Your response still belongs to you. Marcus Aurelius faced enormous uncertainty, yet the Stoic project was never about creating a world where nothing painful happened. It was about becoming the kind of person who could remain rational and principled when painful things did happen. That distinction matters in modern life because we often make emotional stability conditional. I'll be calm when people respect me. I'll be happy when I have enough money. I'll be confident when everything starts working. I'll be disciplined when I feel motivated. But if your peace requires perfect conditions, you have handed control of your inner life to conditions you don't control. Instead, practice conditional independence. Whatever happens, I will choose my response. Not because every situation is easy, because your character is worth protecting. And here's where the habit becomes surprisingly practical. When something triggers you today, don't respond at the speed of your emotion. Pause. Take one breath. Name what happened. Separate the fact from your interpretation. Then choose your response. That pause may last only 2 seconds, but sometimes 2 seconds is the distance between instinct and wisdom, between saying something you cannot take back and remaining silent, between escalating a conflict and ending it, between abandoning your values and acting according to them. So tomorrow morning, don't ask the universe to give you an easy day. Ask yourself for something stronger. Give me the discipline to remain myself when the day becomes difficult. Because you don't become stoic when nothing disturbs you. You become stoic when something does, and you discover that it no longer has the power to decide who you become. Habit 7. Train your mind to want less, not because you deserve less, but because you need less to be free. One of the quietest forms of slavery is needing everything to go your way before you can feel at peace. You need the perfect morning, the perfect response, the perfect relationship, the perfect income, the perfect body, the perfect future. And because reality refuses to become perfect, your mind remains permanently dissatisfied. The more conditions you require for peace, the more opportunities life has to take your peace away. The Stoics challenged this hunger for excess by practicing voluntary simplicity. They understood something uncomfortable. Desire can become an invisible leash. The more things you believe you must have, the more power those things gain over you. Epictetus wasn't powerful because he controlled everything around him. His philosophy aimed at becoming internally free enough that losing external things would not destroy his character. Look at modern life. Someone wakes up and checks their bank balance. Another checks how many people viewed their story. Another looks at someone else's body and immediately feels behind. Another opens their inbox and measures their worth by whether someone important replied. Before breakfast, they have already asked the outside world to tell them whether they should feel successful. That is an exhausting way to live. Your morning should remind you that your value existed before the notifications arrived, before the money, before the praise, before the achievement, before anyone approved of you. A useful practice is to deliberately experience small amounts of simplicity. Drink ordinary water. Walk without headphones. Sit without entertainment. Wear something comfortable without obsessing over appearance. Eat without scrolling. Spend a few minutes doing absolutely nothing productive. At first, the mind may become restless. That restlessness is information. It shows you how accustomed you have become to stimulation. There is a reason sensory deprivation can feel uncomfortable. When external stimulation decreases, internal thoughts become more noticeable. You suddenly hear the thoughts that constant entertainment was covering, and instead of immediately escaping them, you can learn to sit with them. Think about a wealthy person who owns everything except the ability to be alone with their own mind. Their house is enormous, their schedule is full, their possessions are expensive, but silence feels unbearable. Now imagine another person with far less who can sit on a balcony with a cup of tea and genuinely feel at peace. Who is richer in that moment? The answer has little to do with money. It has everything to do with dependency. This doesn't mean rejecting ambition. Stoicism isn't telling you to stop building, earning, improving, or pursuing excellence. It is telling you to stop making your inner stability dependent on the outcome. Want the promotion. Work for it. But don't make your identity depend on receiving it. Want a better body. Train for it. But don't hate the body you have while building the one you want. Want financial freedom. Build it. But don't postpone every moment of gratitude until the number in your account changes. That distinction is incredibly powerful. Desire something without becoming its prisoner. Marcus Aurelius lived surrounded by wealth and power, yet repeatedly reminded himself that external status was temporary. A crown could not make a person virtuous. Possessions could not guarantee peace. Reputation could disappear long after the person stopped caring about it. And that is where this morning habit becomes practical. Before the day begins, ask yourself, what do I believe I need today in order to be okay? Then challenge the answer. Do you really need everyone to understand you? Do you really need every plan to work? Do you really need constant entertainment? Do you really need someone's approval before you can respect yourself? Do you really need today's outcome to prove that you're moving forward? Maybe you want those things, but wanting and needing are not the same. A person who says, I would love to have this, but I can remain whole without it, possesses a kind of psychological strength that possessions cannot buy. Because now the world has fewer buttons to press. Someone can criticize you. You remain steady. Someone can reject you. You remain worthy. A plan can fail. You remain capable. Something can disappear. You can grieve without becoming destroyed. This is not emotional coldness. It is emotional sovereignty. And there is an important paradox here. When you stop desperately needing something, you often become better at pursuing it. You can think more clearly because fear is no longer making every decision. You can negotiate without desperation. You can work without constantly checking whether the result has arrived. You can love without turning another person into your emotional oxygen. So tomorrow morning, before you begin chasing everything you want, spend a moment remembering what you already have. Not as an excuse for complacency, as protection against desperation, because ambition without gratitude becomes hunger, and hunger without limits eventually consumes the person who was trying to satisfy it. Train yourself to want more from life without requiring more from life before you allow yourself to be at peace. That is one of the deepest freedoms a Stoic morning can give you. And once you learn that you don't need the world to constantly give you something, another question appears. What happens when you finally stop carrying yesterday into today? Tomorrow morning, don't wake up and immediately give your mind to the world. Give yourself the first word. Before the notifications, before the pressure, before yesterday's problems return, remember that you still have a choice in how you enter this day. You may not control what happens today. Someone may disappoint you. Plans may collapse. Things may move slower than you want. But you can still protect your attention, govern your reactions, choose discipline over comfort, and remember that your time is more valuable than the distractions trying to consume it. Because a Stoic morning isn't about creating a perfect day. It's about creating a mind that doesn't need a perfect day to remain strong. So tomorrow, begin differently. Be quiet before you become busy. Be deliberate before you become reactive. And choose your character before circumstances choose your mood. Start your morning like a Stoic, and eventually you'll stop waking up merely to face your life. You'll wake up prepared to lead it. If this video gave you something valuable, like the video, subscribe to the channel, share it with someone who needs this mindset, and comment below. I choose my response.